How did we become the bad guy?
Yeah, well, maybe it's, what was it, Lord Acton that said that, um, yeah, power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely. I mean, I think it's, at the end of the Cold War, we could have kind of retreated gracefully and returned to being, what we were always meant to be, a republic and be that um, and not an empire. But the decision was made. There were people, of course, who fought for that. Um, I think Pat Buchanan is one of them. He could certainly say back in the 1990s. But it was the other faction. It was the neoconservatives that won out. They say just no, we can't. Now that we have ultimate power, now that we are the unrivaled superpower, we have to make use of it. Of course, it's all for the good of the world, but that's all tied up with, little love of power, and that love of power, it really corrupted us.
You think then in this new world that we'll be living in the next 5, 10 years will be a more peaceful world? I mean, that's what a multipolar world should hopefully be. I mean,
Yeah,
because the fear is like, will we enter into a new Cold War where both Russia and China are ramping up their militaries and we're trying to ramp up ours here?
yeah,
Because then once it gets big, then what it will it end up corrupting China and Russia? They have these powerful militaries, and
hmm,
now they want, and then there are forces trying to drive it moving forward because
yeah. Well,
twenty
it's true.
percent of your
There's no
economy it just
right,
starts to heat
right,
up.
right.
But
But it's true. I mean, that nobody, you can't say that any country, any government's not immune to the same kind of temptations, let's say. But I don't think there's any chance. It seems to me a realistic chance that Russia, at least in the foreseeable future, let's say in the next few decades, is going to achieve that kind of unipolar dominance, and and then maybe begin to kind of contract this. We'll call it the unipolar disease, that the U.S. is suffering from, which is really just say, this fixation with global hegemony.
mm,
Um,
yeah, I
so,
mean, what
again, who knows? Maybe a century from now, we'll see something similar, and China will be behaving like the U.S. state, but I don't see that in the next couple of decades anyway.
right? Well, I mean, just when you see what BRICS is about, it 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 lends to a brighter future, in my opinion.
Right,
It's about, you do no sanctions. Every country can do its own thing. We're not
right,
imposing things. We're not
yeah,
activists. You're
right,
your country. You do you. We do us. It's a
right,
nice arrangement.
right,
So I hopefully that's the
yeah.
world that we're
Well,
moving
at the
to.
present time, that's one thing you have to. That's correct. It's just like the U.S. has this hegemonic ideology, which they call it by different names. It's the international community, the rules-based international order. But it clearly is not tolerant of different systems, different ideological paths of development. It just simply it is, this is the one. Um, um, it is a universalistic ideology, and that is being spread and enforced with a great deal of zeal. Um, and now, what both Russia, China, and let's say all the members of BRICS, what they're pushing for is not like an alternative universalistic vision. Okay, it's like if you join we have our own set of beliefs, and then everybody needs to subscribe to them. But rather, okay, what what they espouse is multi-civilizational order, right? It's just that each civilization is free to pursue its own civilizational path. So, the Indians are free to be Indians. And, if Hinduism is central to being an Indian, that's really not for us to dispute. They're the Indians and that's their part of the world. And the
I,
Chinese, if they're Confucians, let them be Confucians. And if it's, with the Russians, it's Orthodoxy or whatever. But all of them, and you see this in the speeches, that Putin gives and Xi Jinping gives. It's not that they're, again, pushing their own particular vision. They want, everybody needs to be a Confucianist or everybody needs to be Orthodox or everybody needs to be a Hindu,
or
It's
a
just like,
democracy or whatever,
yeah, right. Well, that's the opposing vision is that you're right. There's this one, it's democracy, but it's also a very particular understanding of democracy. It's, even a democracy that, let's say, a generation ago, is something we would have thought is kind of alien. Now it has all these woke elements to it. If you become becoming part of the club, for example, if you want to
gotta
join.
wave the pride flags like in
Yeah,
Ukraine,
exactly. I
having
mean,
the
that's not an
trans, like
exaggeration.
yeah,
You
right.
are expected to do that, right?
Because
And
it's
if
a
you
human
don't,
rights thing, and they keep on
right.
changing what the human
Yeah,
rights are.
right. It's a very particular
Ba-
definition.
Dead
So you have
babies
to
in
have a gay
Gaza,
pride parade or whatever. I
right?
mean, that's part of like kind of the process of joining the club. And so it's just all very, um, and they're intolerant. Like when you get Hungary or something, who has tried to put the brakes on some of that. I mean, they pretty much threaten, we will destroy you. You cannot, it's unacceptable not to join the club and, to subscribe to all these elements of their ideology.
Yeah, and the Swiss Peace Summit, I think, was a great kind of vote on these two systems. That's really what it was.
Uh-huh.
We're America, we're a democracy. This was a democratic vote. Basically, do we support the Western club or are people or countries looking at something else? And that's what we saw. We saw basically the majority of the world and all the big players, China, India, Brazil, but they all were not wanting to sign this communique of the the basically this ridiculous ultimatum for Russia, and so the world is open to that. Everybody wants to be part of BRICS now. It seems like, um,
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
and
No, it seems like there's a new
it
applicant
sounds
every
like
day.
such a great thing to be part of. I really like that. It's just let everybody be their own thing. Let the Chinese be Chinese.
Right.
Let Russia be Russia, and that's great. Okay. Anyways, you sent me a clip earlier of President Duda. I figured I just watched it once, but we can go ahead and play it, and then I can just hear your comments on it, and then we'll just take it from there.
Sure.
All right. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Kremlin intends to enslave the Ukrainian people, their children, use Ukraine's resources, destroy their culture, and deprive Ukraine of the right to freely choose its development path and security arrangements. In the part of the world which I represent, Russia is often called the prison of nations, and for good reason, because it is home to almost 200 ethnic groups, most of which became residents of Russia as a result of the methods used in Ukraine today. Russia remains the largest colonial empire in a world which, unlike European powers, has never undergone the process of decolonization and has never been able to deal with the demons of its past.
All right. Pretty strong words.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where do you even start? Well, a lot of stuff packed in that 1 minute.
Yeah. Right. The prison of nations. Yeah. Yeah. That's okay. Yeah. That's not just some weirdo. That's the president of Poland. Um, and yeah, the things that he was like what he was saying there has been echoed by the presidents of the Baltic states, um, and by some of our think tanks here in the U.S. talking about the decolonization of Russia. That means breaking up Russia. That's this is it's not just regime change or a change in course, but actually breaking up Russia. Now, um, Yeah, he's referring to the fact that there are a lot of different ethnicities within Russia. We know about the Chechens, there are the Cossacks, there are various Mongolian and other kind of East Asian groups.
Mhm.
Um, Now, I think they'd be surprised to learn that they're in need of liberation. That they're actually prisoners within Russia. And one thing when he mentioned that, I just thought of the recent Russian presidential election. The region in which Putin got the highest winning vote was Chechnya. It was something like 98%.
Yeah, they
And
love
it,
them.
yeah,
They
right. I mean,
love
and
them.
that's nobody really is going to dispute that because look, they're there fighting on the front lines.
Mm.
They're very enthusiastic supporters of Russia. And then the second highest percentage was one of the Mongolian republics. It may have been the Tuva Republic, where former defense minister Sergei Shoigu came from. It's almost entirely the people there are basically Mongolians. It used to be a part of Outer Mongolia, and
Well,
there was like 97%. And I remember seeing recently, there was just watching a video about a hero coming back from the front lines in Ukraine. He was a Tuvan tank commander who, his tank actually, I think, he got in a duel or more than a duel. I mean, he took on several Ukrainian tanks, including, the Western tanks, and destroyed them all. So it was like, I can't remember, it was 1-6 or something, and he just turned around, fired, um, destroyed all the tanks, and it was a celebrated victory, this little tank battle. But he went home a hero to the Tuva, and you could see him coming. They had a big parade and the dancing girls and singers and a big billboard with pictures of Shoigu and Putin, and you could see these people were very, very proud of their, of their native son right there. I mean, this is the so-called prison of nations. I mean, there's just nothing in there that made anybody who really knows Russia, has been to Russia, just knows that it's completely false. It's hard to believe that they're so misinformed. But I guess, sometimes hatred or whatever can just so distort your perception of reality that you don't even, you completely lose track. I'm kind of thinking about somebody in a bitter divorce or whatever. They just got to make out the other person to be a monster. And to the point where, you start hearing this person, I don't know what you're talking about. I think like a few years ago, you knew that that wasn't true, but they just their hatred warps their perception of reality to such an extent that it just like, uh, you know,
well, it's just funny the choice of language because basically, you're saying all these ethnicities. It's like, oh, great, it's diversity. That's the
yeah,
number
right.
one thing, right? You guys love that. You want as many different
Yeah,
ethnic groups in there as possible.
right,
And then they use the word instead of diversity, they call it a prison of nations. It's like,
right,
are
right.
you saying that we need to divide, segregate everybody by their
Yeah,
ethnicity into
right.
their own nation because we can't have diversity? Isn't that
Yeah, right,
antithetical to the whole
right.
Western project?
Yeah.
It's
Well, I think it actually, I mean, just the fact that, hey, look, that, the Chechens are very strong supporters, the Tuvans, and so of the Russian government. I think, we talked about multi-civilizational and a multi-civilizational approach, right? That's what we find on the BRICS side of this larger conflict. Um, but it's not just between countries, but even within a country. I think that's the approach that Russia has taken within, the Russian Federation. You say, okay, there are these autonomous regions, and they say, you do things differently there. There are certain laws that we all have to follow, or whatever, but you can preserve your culture. We're not going to go in there again and make sure you have a gay pride parade or whatever. You do what you think, you know, what's appropriate to, your people. Like, for example, the Tuvans are largely Buddhists. Say, okay, and only 0.5% of them are Orthodox. Okay, but you're Buddhist. Shoigu is a Buddhist. This is something that
interesting.
we're not going to try um, to suppress Buddhism or even to change it in any significant way. You pursue, you're free to embrace your identity within this larger framework of the Russian Federation. And I think that's why find such positive feelings. They've prospered. At the same time, they have a sense of being their own people, but they're very thankful that the Russians have provided this kind of larger environment in which they can prosper.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of what the US was supposed to be. We were a federal system,
Yeah,
right? And we didn't, so it's ironic that the way what you're saying sounds like something that what I thought America was supposed to be, so um yeah, okay. Anyways, that it's almost comical listening to that speech when
yeah,
I heard it. I wanted to laugh, but it's also very frightening.
right.
And I actually got one other clip for you. It's Putin's speech. I'm sure you heard it. I actually cut it from Judge Napolitano's Judging Freedom show. So there's a Judging Freedom banner on there. Don't get mad at me, Judge Knapp. I'm sure you'll
Okay.
be okay with it. But I think it's a very important speech, clip from his speech that everybody in America should listen to. Everybody in the West, I think, needs to hear this. And it's a shame that more people don't hear this. Okay.
Lastly, the self-centeredness and arrogance of Western countries have led us to a highly perilous situation today. We are inching dangerously close to a point of no return. Calls for a strategic defeat of Russia, which possesses the largest arsenals of nuclear weapons, demonstrate the extreme recklessness of Western politicians. They either fail to comprehend the magnitude of the threat they are creating, or are simply consumed by their notion of invincibility and exceptionalism. Both scenarios can result in tragedy. It is evident that the entire system of Euro-Atlantic security is crumbling before our eyes. At present, it is practically non-existent and must be rebuilt. To achieve this, we must collaborate with interested countries, of which there are many, to develop our own strategies for ensuring security in Eurasia, and then present them for broader international deliberation. This is the task set in the address to the Federal Assembly. To outline a vision for equal and indivisible security, mutually beneficial and equitable cooperation, and development on the Eurasian continent in the foreseeable future.
It's very clear, less than 1 minute, just everybody should listen and understand what he's saying there, and then think about what Duda was president of Poland. Duda
Right,
was saying
right.
about decolonizing and breaking up Russia into these ethnic groups, just the dangerous game we're
Yeah,
playing. And he
right.
also touches on the vision of his multipolar world where people can live in peace and pursue their own, their own civilization. Like you said, it's a beautiful concept in my opinion. I don't know, any thoughts or comments on that video?
Yeah. Well, no, it's what he said. Is absolutely true. I mean, this desire to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia is not only is it foolish, it's much more than foolish. It's just really insane. I mean, if you actually succeeded at it, the whole world would be at risk, because as Russia has made clear, and I think any sane observer of the situation would understand, if the very existence of Russia was put at risk, if Russia was, if the this mad dream of Duda and others could actually be realized, or Russia would begin to break apart. If we ever reach that stage, I think we really would see nuclear war break out. I mean, that's where it could really happen, where it's almost likely to happen. So what are you doing? What are these people who talk like they should not be in any kind of positions of power, but they are. It's, you can say, well, that was just Duda. Okay, but Poland's a considerable country. It's an important part of the EU, an important part of NATO. Okay, the Baltic states are small. But the thing is, like when he made this statement, to my knowledge, nobody corrected him. This is something that, and he and others have been making these kind of statements for a while. And now the Russians are hearing them. And, how are they supposed to respond? They understand, like clearly Putin made it clear, they understand the threat. They understand, the very, this absolute insane delusion that has gripped parts of the Western elite. And, so they're proceeding accordingly. I think, this is what what has led us to where we are, why we have this war, why this war is going to continue. The Russians know that they cannot be defeated. They know what these people are after, and they see that their very existence is at stake. So, that's where we are.
Oh, it's scary. I just, some of these forces, once they build up and it starts moving, it just sometimes it just feels like they won't stop. Even though we know where this leads, the outcome could be absolutely catastrophic. But
Yeah, it's kind of like a nightmare, where you see something happening and you're completely powerless to stop it.
right,
It's got to, both in Israel and this and in Ukraine. I'm not saying that it definitely will end this way. Again, the there are reasons, especially in the case of Ukraine. It's just, I think, because of Russia really does have things under control and has the upper edge. People like Duda are simply going to lose. Now, I think that that's what's going to happen, but it's going to be a very scary process, and there are going to be times when, the whole thing could spin out of control. And again, in Israel, though, I just don't really see the off-ramp anywhere. It just seems like it's
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think, it could be soon. It could be any day where we'll see some major move, a
Yeah.
big step, with Lebanon, major offensive in Ukraine. We're coming close to the final chapters. I'm getting
Yeah, I don't know if it's the
scary.
final chapter, but I think it's just the next chapter, which is going to be scarier than the
Okay,
previous one. That's
sure, right.
this could go on for a long
A new
time.
chapter, right. Yeah, I
Yeah,
should say final chapter, but yeah, right. It could be the end game of the finishing of book one. Act two might start
yeah.
up, and it could be a scary one. Okay, well, Dad, I think maybe that's a good place to stop on that cheery note. So, okay, thanks a lot, and we
Oh,
will talk again on Friday.
happy Friday, right?
On Happy Friday, right? Okay, bye bye.
Bye.